Hi, everyone. Good evening. And it is such a pleasure to be here and to just be sharing with you. Um, Thank you, Garrett, for that introduction. I really can't remember the first time that I've met you, but I feel like I met you five or six different times for the first time. So that, again, goes to what you shared about the power of being connected, the power of a network. I do want to express gratitude to Seraph, to Garrett, to the rest of the individuals who are a part of this network. I think even just watching the videos that were played so far and looking at the lineup of folks in the network, I'm excited just to see so many friends and colleagues and peers who are a part of the network and who are doing this work of connecting people and communities to the outdoors. I also do want to acknowledge the land and the people of the land of where I'm calling in from. And so I do want to extend gratitude to the Lenape people who have been the caretakers and who are the caretakers of the land now called New Jersey. Like Art said, my passion and my life's work is rooted in liberation for all people, primarily communities of color, but my communities. And that liberation not based in the structure that we this context of white supremacy that we see invade our lives on a daily basis. For me, my work shows up in a commitment to organizing and redistributing power and resources in order to achieve equity and justice. I pour energy into building community and relationship between people of different backgrounds, and but also people and an empowered or emergent vision of the future. Uh, and from what I know from working with folks in the network, from what I've seen in videos so far, I feel like that's the reason why we do this work. That's a lot of the reason why we do this work in general. To build those connections, to repair some of those relationships, to center communities and restore. I think in talking to Sarah, used language of restoring an outdoor lineage to communities that have been excluded and oppressed for far too long, and to bring what is a human right. Especially we've seen this uh, really emphasized during this pandemic when we've all been quarantined at home, and we've realized how important the human right of connection to nature is, whether it's in your front yard, the ability to go to a park, or the ability to explore public lands in our areas. And we've also seen just the interaction. I think a couple of times we've heard it mentioned on this call, but we also realize why diversity, equity, justice, and inclusion show up as such important values in this work that we're doing of connecting people to nature. They're not separate. Oftentimes we'll hear people ask, well, why is race being brought up as an issue here? And we realize how intersectional life it actually is. When situations like Ahmaud Arbery happen, and folks going out for a jog are also in fear of their life. Christian Cooper, who was already mentioned, and countless others who make it very clear and stark how these two these two factors are part of the intersection that we live at on a daily basis. And so, with the mission of Outdoor Empowers Network and the different groups centered around connecting or reconnecting children and communities to nature, my mind goes to the question of like, what is the bigger why? Why are we connecting people to nature? And if it part of the reason is it's to benefit them, to give them that access. The question is, okay, well, why haven't they had that access? And you can keep following that path down the line. When I was a kid, when I was in my younger days, I was definitely that kid who pestered adults with that question of why. I needed to know why for every single action I was going to take. And if you didn't have a reason, I would continue that pressure in a slightly annoying way until I got an answer that was satisfying to me, or was able to get to the root cause of what we're discussing or doing. And my mom and my late grandmother did not escape this pressure at all. Neither did my instructors in my first job in the outdoor industry as a crew leader for the Student Conservation Association, leading trips and or leading conservation crews in Seattle or leading trips in the North Cascades. One of the things I did learn in being able to ask why, okay, so like, why are we pulling these plants out? Why are we doing some of this work? Are two of the key concepts that I want to leave us with tonight. Two of the three key concepts I want to leave us with tonight. One of them is that growth happens in the soil, and so we want to pay attention to that. And two is that change takes place at the roots. In planting and learning from my mother and grandmother, I learned that it wasn't just good enough to get a plant, put it in the ground, cover its root with dirt a little bit, and then it would be okay. My mom and my grandmother would often go and get special potting soil, or they'd get fertilized soil, and they'd make sure that the surrounding environment around this plant was set up in a way where it would be able to grow, because that made a stark difference. Soil without the proper nutrients prevents growth just as much as systems can provide that context for our lives and for our connection to the outdoors. So we'll hold that right now. Growth happens in the soil. In the conservation and invasive removal we did with Seattle City Parks, our efforts to eradicate plants who were suppressing the local ecosystem was often only as effective as our ability to remove not just the head of the plant, but also about getting to the root and removing it from the root as well. And so sometimes that happens and that's what happens in our work in connecting people to the outdoors as well. We want to remove the barriers that people face in connecting to the outdoors. And sometimes our efforts at giving gear, our efforts at providing opportunities are part of this solution, but not the whole picture. And so we ask the question again, like, why? What more is there that we can do? And that brings us to the third point, which is the tool that I want to share with you all to carry forward. In some of my community organizing and diversity, equity, inclusion work, we've started to learn and use from an organization called FSG's Framework of Systems Change, which shows that change happens at several levels. And I'm sorry I don't have it up on the screen, but you can look it up through Googling that, or we can share it afterwards for more information. It shows that change happens at several levels. Structural change is the most obvious, and that happens with policies, practices, and the exchange of resources. Oftentimes, we look at issues of access to the outdoors and gear as an issue of policy or practice or resource flows like gear libraries, and our solutions start there. But it goes deeper than that. The second level is not as explicit, it's not as obvious, and it shows up on a semi-explicit level, and it has to do with relationships and power dynamics. So as we're implementing these policies, as we're implementing these programs, sharing these resources, how do we go a level deeper to the relationships that are built or that need to be repaired? We talk about land acknowledgements, and land acknowledgements are fantastic, but again, they're part of a system. They're a policy that needs to be connected to the repair of relationship with our Indigenous family members, with the land and things of that nature, with an addressing of what the power dynamics are that uphold some of the policies and practices that we see today. And then the bottom of this inverted pyramid that you'll see when you look it up, is our mental models, the ways that people think that we can't necessarily see, and how we can create change in the way that people think or approach nature or connection to nature, or the way that our communities are shaped, or the barriers that they face, so that we can support change that happens on a much deeper and much a level that goes much deeper than just the topsoil. And so here's where we set our learning edge. Here's my call to action for you this evening. Society 2020, like Garrett mentioned, has been insane on several different fronts. Whether we're talking political, whether we're talking society, whether we're talking, the public health or any of these factors, it's exposed a lot of the cracks that exist in our society soil. And so when we go back to growth happening in the soil, we see places where we may be able to, we might need to go deeper and not just talk about the ability or the availability of gear, but look to where that gear is coming from. Look to how that cost presents a challenge. During the pandemic, conversations around how close is the nearest park. Organizations like the Trust for Public Land and their 10-minute walk program investigate how close the nearest park is. And that's a mental model of like how cities are built. So we're investigating some of those things to figure out how we address those cracks in society's soil. So I encourage you, continue to support your local OEN members, continue to support your fellow members as they enact change in access through culturally relevant and inclusive programming and through sharing gear. This is the soil that your connection is planted in. This is often the introduction that people have to the outdoors. And my call to action is that as you do so, continue to investigate what needs to change at the roots. Investigate the mental models, the relationships, and the power dynamics that have supported and set up the outdoor field and the inequities in how it is currently established. Be that annoying 7-year-old CJ and continue to ask why. Ask why, ask who is in charge, ask who is excluded. Keep asking questions until they become a part of the culture and the practice. This is how we take individual and collective responsibility. This is how we leave our best trace. This is how we restore and repair relationship with both the land and each other. And this is how we begin to think in an emergent way, not just about the barriers that are faced, not just about the things that are going wrong and the cracks that 2020 may have exposed in our society, but truly as an empowered outdoors network. And yes, I had to slip that one in there, where we're thinking in an emergent way about the future, the assets we have, and the power that we have to create a world in which we want to live.